The alien forces loomed over the human, the battlefield echoing with their eerie, mechanical hums. The leader, a towering figure clad in shimmering metallic armor, peered down at the fallen man. Travis. His body, battered and bruised, lay motionless on the ground. Blood trickled from a wound on his chest, staining the cracked earth beneath him. The silence was unbearable. No one moved. The warriors surrounding him waited, their weapons still aimed at the vulnerable human form. Their expressions, hard and unyielding, showed no sign of doubt. He was done for. They were certain. But then, it happened. A laugh. A raspy, strained chuckle that seemed to reverberate across the desolate landscape. It cut through the thick air, sharp and mocking. It was not the laugh of a man who had given up, it was the laugh of someone defying an inevitable end. The general, Zalor, froze, his hands still gripping his energy rifle. His golden, slitted eyes narrowed, scanning the human with suspicion. Travis had been shot directly, his chest pierced by an energy blast meant to disintegrate him. Yet there he was, laughing as though the very notion of death was beneath him. How is this possible? Zalor murmured, the words escaping before he could catch them. The soldiers around him fidgeted. Their alien minds couldn't comprehend the scene unfolding before them. They had eradicated entire civilizations with far less effort, but this human. He was different. Too different. Travis's eyes flickered open, focusing on the gleaming faces of the alien invaders above him. His lips twisted into a half-smile, a defiant gleam in his green eyes. "You don't get it, do you?" he rasped, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. Zalor took a step back, the uncertainty creeping into his mind. He had expected fear, perhaps desperation, but not this. Not this human laughter. Something primal, something dangerous, surged through his chest. The air was thick with tension. A distant storm crackled ominously in the sky, its low thunder adding to the unease. For a brief moment, the battlefield was still, as if even the universe itself were waiting. Travis struggled to rise, his body trembling, not from weakness, but from sheer will. His bloodied hand pressed against the cold dirt, his breathing shallow but steady. The defiance in his posture spoke louder than any words could. This human, this insignificant being, was not afraid to die. And that terrified the predators. "You think you've won?" Travis's voice was barely a whisper now, but it was heavy with defiance. His chest heaved with each strained breath, but there was a fire in him that refused to go out. Zalor narrowed his eyes. He had known fear before, in the face of rebellion and insurrection, but never like this. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, easily crushed under the might of the galactic forces. But Travis, lying there, bleeding, had shown him something else. Something that challenged everything the predators had ever believed about humanity. "We'll take you as prisoner," Zalor declared, his voice betraying a slight hesitation. "Learn what makes you so unbroken." Travis let out another laugh, this time quieter, almost a whisper. "I'm not broken. You are. And soon, you'll see why." The alien soldiers exchanged confused glances. Their general was hesitant, their victory slipping from their grasp. Something about this human, something about his laughter, was digging deep into their minds, unsettling their beliefs. They had faced countless species, extinguished entire planets, yet none had ever responded like this. As they closed in, Travis's eyes shone with a glimmer of something the aliens couldn't quite place: hope, determination, or perhaps madness. It didn't matter. Whatever it was enough to ignite fear in their hearts. Fear of what they had just awakened. The general stepped closer, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "Why do you laugh, human?" he asked, his voice trembling with the first crack of uncertainty. Travis's grin widened, his eyes glowing with an almost unnatural resolve. "Because," he said, his voice low and chilling, "I've only just begun." The storm rumbled louder, as if echoing his words. And with that, the galaxy would never be the same again. The tension hung heavy, the laughter still ringing in their ears as the scene closed. A mystery had begun, one the predators could not yet understand. A human, standing against them not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous, hope. And in that moment, they realized that humanity's strength was far more than just survival. It was a force they could never anticipate. The alien stronghold felt cold. It wasn't the temperature, it was the weight of the silence. The once sterile corridors now buzzed with a strange, unsettled energy. Zalor, the Predator General, paced slowly in his command room, his sharp claws tapping rhythmically against the metal floor. His golden eyes flickered as he stared at the hollow display in front of him, where the image of the human, Travis, lingered like an unsolved puzzle. "Report," Zalor growled, his voice a low hiss. A soldier stepped forward, his face a tight mask of confusion. "General, the human, he should not be alive. We've analyzed the energy blast. It was designed to disintegrate." Zalor clenched his fists. He had seen countless species die in countless ways, but this human was something different. His laughter, his strength in the face of death, gnawed at him. "What of the analysis on his resilience?" "Unclear, General. We've never encountered anything like it. His physiology doesn't match any of the recorded human data. It's as if he thrives under extreme pressure." Zalor's frustration bubbled up. He turned sharply, pacing again, the weight of his thoughts heavier than his armor. "He's broken. It's a trick. He has to be." Another soldier spoke, hesitation clear in his voice. "Perhaps, General, we have underestimated them." The words struck like a cold wind, and Zalor froze. He turned to face the soldier, his face a mask of fury. "You speak of underestimation?" His voice trembled with the rage of a leader unwilling to admit that the human before him, just one human, could challenge everything they believed. He turned back to the hollow display, his mind racing. The human, Travis, was not broken, not in the way they had assumed. His laughter had been genuine. It had been defiance, not madness. Travis lay restrained in a sterile holding cell, the metallic hum of the ship vibrating beneath his back. The cold floor beneath him made every movement an effort, but he refused to show weakness. The shock of the blast still echoed in his body, but his mind was clear. He had to keep it that way. Every instinct told him to fight back, to resist, but something deeper told him to wait. The moment wasn't right. Not yet. He could hear the distant conversations of his captors, the clink of their armor, the hiss of their language, alien, cold, and unfamiliar. But all he could focus on was the sound of his own breath, slow and deliberate. He was alone, trapped in a prison of their design, but his mind was his own. It had to be. The door to his cell hissed open, the cool rush of air bringing with it a sense of foreboding. A figure stepped inside, its silhouette tall and imposing. "Zalor." "You," Travis rasped, lifting his head. "Still alive, huh? Thought you'd be done with me by now." Zalor's golden eyes flicked over him, scanning him like a specimen. "Why do you laugh, human?" Travis's lips twisted into a grin, though the pain was sharp. "Maybe because you think you've already won. But you haven't." Zalor's gaze darkened, and his voice dropped lower, laced with a deadly edge. "I've killed civilizations, human. Entire worlds. And you, what are you? Nothing but a flicker of defiance in the vastness of the galaxy." Travis's breath quickened, but he held his ground, eyes locked onto the aliens. "You might have destroyed worlds, but you'll never break us. Not the way you think. You might kill me, but it won't matter." Zalor's expression faltered. Something in the human's words hit too close to a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. "Explain yourself," he demanded, though the words were hollow. Travis coughed, the taste of blood bitter in his mouth, but his voice remained steady. "You think you know what we are, what we'll become when we're pushed. But you don't. Humans, we bend, but we don't break. You can kill a body, but you'll never destroy what drives it. That's why we win." Zalor stood frozen, a creeping realization settling in. His soldiers, his entire species, had believed themselves invincible. They believed that the galaxy bent to their will. But this human, this fragile, bloody creature, had just shown them something far more dangerous than a weapon, an indomitable spirit. The tension thickened, and Zalor's mind reeled. "You speak of winning," he said, his voice quieter now, tinged with an unspoken challenge. "But what does victory mean for your kind?" Travis's gaze sharpened. "You'll see soon enough. You'll all see." Zalor's eyes narrowed, but the seed of doubt had been planted. A sudden, cold silence enveloped them, as if the very air held its breath. Neither spoke as the weight of what had just been said lingered between them, an invisible thread tightening with each passing second. Travis's grin remained, as if he knew something the alien did not. As if he had already won. And for the first time, Zalor wondered if he had. The door slid shut with a sharp hiss. Zalor stood alone in the hallway, his mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. The future of his species, of the entire galaxy, was no longer certain. Something had changed. Something within that human had shaken him in a way nothing else had. And now, as he stood there, a deep, unsettling truth gnawed at him: this fight was far from over. The alien ship hummed with the low groan of shifting metal, but inside the cell, Travis remained still, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. His mind was a battlefield, each pulse of pain reminding him of his vulnerability, yet his defiance only grew stronger. The faint smell of burnt circuits mixed with the sterile chill of the ship's air filtration system, the sound of the quiet hum echoing in his ears as he waited. Zalor had left him alone for now, but the heavy weight of their previous conversation lingered in the silence. He could feel the alien's presence still, like a shadow hanging over him. They hadn't fully understood yet, hadn't realized just how far humanity would go to survive. But they would. They would have no choice but to face it. The door slid open, its hiss sharp against the quiet, and Travis lifted his head, eyes narrowing as another figure entered, a tall, lean alien with skin as white as bone, his eyes dark and calculating. This was Zarek, the ship's chief tactician. Unlike the brute force of Zalor, Zarek was all precision, an intellect wrapped in an aura of cold detachment. "You think you've won?" Zarek's voice was low, flat, almost devoid of emotion as he approached. He stood in front of Travis, studying him with a detached gaze, as if analyzing a specimen under a microscope. Travis didn't flinch. "I haven't won yet, but I will. You've just given me a front-row seat to watch you fall apart." Zarek's mouth twitched, the slightest curve of a smile, but there was no humor in it, only cold calculation. "You speak as if this is a game. A victory for your kind will be nothing but an illusion. The predators do not lose." "Then maybe it's time you redefined what losing means," Travis responded, his voice growing stronger with each word. He could feel it, the tension, the shift in the air as the game changed. He knew something Zarek didn't: humans didn't need to win through strength. We won by adapting, by surviving, by bending when the universe tried to break us. Zarek's eyes narrowed as if the idea was alien to him. "You think your survival instinct will be enough? You are nothing but a child in the hands of a god." The words hit harder than any blow. Yet, Travis didn't respond with anger. Instead, he smiled, faintly, but with a quiet confidence that sent a ripple of unease through Zarek. "You're right. I'm a child. But we've survived through things far worse than your gods. And we'll keep surviving. What are you going to do when that's the only thing left?" Zarek's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to the side, as though considering something beyond the moment. Then, with a quick, almost imperceptible motion, he pressed a button on the wall, and the entire room went dark. A silence so thick it was suffocating filled the space between them. Travis blinked, adjusting to the sudden absence of light, but it wasn't the darkness that unsettled him. It was the quiet hum of the ship that now felt like an impending storm. The air, too, felt charged. It wasn't right. Before he could make sense of it, the lights flickered back on, but something was different. The cell had shifted. The walls were closing in. Slowly at first, the metal plates groaned, inching inward, crushing the space around him. Zarek's voice was a whisper in the growing pressure. You wanted to survive, human. Let's see how far that instinct can carry you when you have nowhere to run. Travis didn't panic. He knew what this was, an interrogation. But this time, the stakes were different. This time, the walls weren't just a physical challenge. They were a symbol. A symbol of everything humanity had endured, of every broken piece of their history they had built from the ground up. The walls continued to close. The air grew tighter. His pulse hammered in his ears, but there was no fear. Not now. Instead, his mind raced, looking for an escape, for any advantage he could exploit. Do you understand what you're doing? Travis said, his voice calm but sharp. You're teaching me. Every time you push, you teach me how to adapt, how to survive. This isn't just your ship anymore. It's a classroom. Zarek's eyes flickered with something, frustration, perhaps, or the first hint of doubt. But he remained silent, his face a mask. As the walls continued to inch closer, Travis focused. Every movement of the ship, every sound, every shift in the air around him, it was information. And that was all he needed. One last push, one final opportunity. He had to be ready when the time came. The pressure was unbearable now. His breath was shallow, the air growing thin, but his mind was still sharp. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't allow them to weaken. He had been through worse, had seen worse, and he'd survived it all. Finally, the walls stopped. A sudden, jarring halt. The pressure eased just enough for him to breathe again, but he didn't stop there. No, this wasn't about surviving. It was about proving a point. The point that Zarek, Zalor, and the entire Predator Empire would never understand. Guess what, Zarek? Travis's grin returned. I'm still here. The walls of the holding chamber groaned as the pressure fluctuated, an eerie hum reverberating through the air. Travis lay in the center of the cell, bruised and bloodied but still alive. His mind was sharp despite the physical toll, his thoughts racing. The last few days had tested him, pushed him to the brink, but now, he was no longer just surviving. He was fighting back. He could hear footsteps approaching, the sound of boots echoing in the hallway. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Zalor. The general, ever present, ever watching. Travis could feel the alien's gaze on him before the door even slid open. But this time, there was no hesitation in his stance. He had a plan. The door hissed open, and Zalor stepped inside, his towering form framed by the harsh light from the corridor. His golden eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity as he studied Travis. There was something in his gaze, something calculating. Something fearful. You're still alive, Zalor's voice was thick with disbelief, his tone low and dangerous. Why do you continue to fight? You know you cannot win. Travis didn't move, his gaze never leaving Zalor's. I'm not trying to win. I'm just trying to survive. You can't kill what won't stay down. The general's jaw tightened. You mistake survival for victory, human. We have conquered worlds, destroyed entire civilizations. You are no different. You will fall just like the others. Travis's lips curled into a smile, though it was faint and strained. You think I haven't seen this before? Seen your kind wipe out entire populations? You think that scares me? I've seen death, Zalor. I've stared it down. You're not the first to come here, and you won't be the last. Zalor took a step forward, his imposing figure casting a shadow over Travis. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing heavier with the weight of his presence. You speak of death like you understand it. You have no idea what it's like to have your people erased from existence. To be at the mercy of a force you cannot fight. I've lost everything before, Travis responded, his voice steady but low. And I've survived. I've always survived. The general's eyes flashed with irritation. Enough of this. You will tell me how you survived. You will explain what makes you different. Travis took a slow breath, his body aching, but his mind still sharp. He knew what this moment meant. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. I'm not going to tell you anything. Not because I can't, but because you'll never understand. You think you've won, Zalor. You think you have the power to crush us, but you're wrong. That's why you'll lose. Zalor's hand twitched toward the weapon at his side, his patience wearing thin. But before he could make a move, the ship's alarm blared, a shrill warning that cut through the tense silence like a knife. The walls shuddered, and the ground beneath them trembled. Zalor's eyes flickered toward the door. What is happening? He barked, his voice sharp. Travis could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The ship was no longer the quiet, cold metal fortress it had been. Something was changing, something that neither he nor Zalor could control. The alarm blared louder, and a voice crackled over the intercom, distorted but urgent. This is not a drill. Intruder alert. All hands on deck. Prepare for combat. Zalor's face twisted with fury. Who dares? That would be us. The voice was unmistakable. A human voice. Travis's heart skipped a beat, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. The cavalry had arrived. The door to the holding chamber burst open, and a squad of humans stormed in, weapons drawn, their expressions fierce and determined. They were not here for diplomacy or negotiations. They were here for one thing: rescue. Zalor reacted quickly, his hand moving toward his weapon, but Travis was already moving. The adrenaline from his rescue surged through him, clearing the fog of pain and exhaustion. He pushed himself off the floor, his legs shaky but steady enough to support him as he lunged toward the group. A firefight erupted in the confined space, the air thick with the crackling sound of blaster fire and the hiss of energy shields. Travis ducked behind a pillar, his heart pounding in his chest, but his mind focused. These were his people, humans who had come to fight, to save him. And in this moment, they were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for everything. Zalor's soldiers attempted to regroup, but they were disoriented, outmatched by the fierce, unyielding human force. Travis watched, a sense of awe mingling with his fury. These were the people who had once been considered weak, fragile, doomed to be wiped out. And now, they were the ones turning the tide of the battle. Get to the ship, one of the humans shouted, motioning for Travis to follow. He didn't need to be told twice. He ran, his muscles screaming in protest, but he pushed forward, his mind focused on the escape. They reached the transport bay, the ramp lowering with a deafening hiss. Travis didn't look back. He couldn't. All he could think about was the moment ahead, one final push for freedom. As he climbed aboard, the door slammed shut behind him. He fell into a seat, breathing heavily, his body on the edge of collapse, but his heart soaring. The ship lifted off, the sound of thrusters roaring as they broke free from the alien stronghold. In the distance, the planet's surface grew smaller, the gleaming structures of the enemy now just a fading memory. And as Travis sat there, surrounded by the humans who had fought to free him, he realized something that had been building in him all along: humanity's true strength wasn't just in survival. It was in defiance. In the unrelenting will to stand tall, even when the universe tried to crush them. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, he felt the stirrings of victory. The predators had underestimated them, and they would never make that mistake again. But the war had just begun.